Welcome to the Prosthetics and Orthotics Podcast with Brent Wright and Joris Peels. Hello, everyone. This is Joris Peels with another edition of the Prosthetics and Orthotics Podcast with Brent Wright, of course. Welcome, Brent.
Hey, Joris. I can't say that I have jet lag because coming from Guatemala, you don't really get jet lag. It's only 2 hours. However, it did take us about 30 hours to go less than 2,000 miles.
Wow.
So,
Oh, man. Did everything go wrong or what happened? What happened?
well, we made it to the airport. We in Guatemala City, so it's just a short flight from where we are, which is near the border of Mexico, to Guatemala City, and then it should be like a 4 to 6 hour layover, but it turned into like more than that. and then they were like, "Hey, do you want to stay in Guatemala City? Because you're probably going to miss your connection in Miami." And then they came to us and said, "Oh no, you're definitely going to make your connection in Miami." And so we go to Miami, and there's just no way we're going to make our connection. By the time you have to get your bags, clear customs, and then the security line on the connecting flights doesn't have anything for TSA PreCheck or global entry. So you're just in the same line as everybody else. And it was like, well, that's not going to happen. So we spent the night in Miami, and then
that's such a wonderful airport as well. It's so great. I actually missed the connection. I spent the night as well, just sleeping by myself in a terminal at Miami International Airport. That was wonderful.
Well, they ended up giving us a hotel room, so it wasn't
Really?
terrible.
That's nice. That's
It's
nice.
one of those things. It's like,
Yeah.
you get in at 11, and you just got to pop back up around 4:30.
Oh,
And
wow.
so
And you
then
shower.
but from Miami to Raleigh is typically a nonstop flight, but they had to route us through Charlotte to get to Raleigh. So anyway, but
Luckily, you didn't
man,
have a lot of luggage or anything, right? No.
well, so that's the beauty of coming back. When we went down, we had like probably 10 bags, and when we came back, we had suitcases full of suitcases. So we had three bags, but all of those had the telescoping suitcases down together, and then one bag of just our supplies.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it was a great trip though, really good. A lot of firsts on this trip, which was really neat.
Okay. Well, so first of all, just in case people drop into our podcast without knowing what you do, is you started a long time ago. Well, essentially, would you start first with Life Enabled, or did you start first like in a more informal way, like to make essentially prosthetics more available, and specifically in one region in Guatemala, right?
Right. Yeah. So I started going there in 2006, which it's a little town called San Benito, which is right outside of the Mayan ruins, close to the border of Mexico. It represents a massive amount of people, but there's no way to get prosthetic care in that area unless you go to Guatemala City. And even if you go to Guatemala City, there's only, I think, one or two prosthetists in the whole country that serve the whole country. So it's pretty crazy. So
And is there a reason why? Because like Guatemala City setting up there would seem to be much easier. Did you want to avoid those guys, not to like kind of come in there with your good intentions and deprive them of their revenue or something? What was the thinking of going to like this isolated place?
yeah, so that's definitely one of the things is we want to make sure that we're caring for people that can't get care. So people that don't have money. So in Guatemala City, there is money and there's money in other places. But the biggest thing is we want to make sure that what we're doing does not hinder the people that are doing the work, say for quote unquote profit down in Guatemala. We definitely don't want to take that away from them. The reason why we're in that area though is it's about a 10-hour drive, sometimes an overnight bus ride to get to Guatemala City, and that can be very expensive for people. And so we wanted to be right in the middle of being able to help a large number of people. And then there was also a hospital up there called Hospital Shalom that we've partnered with that takes care of the medical side of people as well. So more than prosthetics. So for instance, people that have diabetes or that have had a traumatic amputation, and there's amputations that happen that would never happen in the US. So like there's a snake down there called the yellow-bearded snake, and literally if you don't get care within a few hours, and that care usually is a life-saving amputation. That snake is just that bad. And then you have motorcycle accidents, people trying to get off of buses. There's a lot of farming accidents as well. So a lot of that sort of thing that you wouldn't necessarily see here in the U.S.
Is it the and yeah, is that just like, is that just a country that's poorer? Is it just poorer, the less labor standards, less kind of safety, less, less hospitals close to people? Is that what drives that?
That's a well. So like for instance, the motorcycle accidents. That is your minivan essentially. They'll line up 5, 6 people on a small motorcycle to get their family around, and you'll have one or two kids sitting on the gas tank, dad's driving the bike, mom's sitting side saddle with one or two kids, and it's just a massive safety hazard that way, but that's just a way of life there. And then the farming stuff,
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
I mean, it typically with that stuff, all the safety stuff usually inhibits the machine, and so you see all kinds of ways that things go around the safety, right? So we've had people that have lost their limbs in chippers, wood chippers. We've had a young girl lose her hand in a meat grinder. So all that safety equipment was stripped away, and it typically would not happen, but because that safety equipment was stripped away, it did happen.
Okay, okay. And and one would think that the incidence is not that high because you are in a small. You said that the city serves a wide area, but still you're in a kind of small. It's not like there's not like a million people there. You know what I mean? It just surprised me that the incidence is so high.
Yeah, well, it's what's crazy is Guatemala City is the most kind of populous, I would say, developed city there. But the area that we serve, it makes up 66% of the land mass of Guatemala. So there's a lot of people in that 66%. And and a lot of them are indigenous as well. So some sort of Mayan heritage, and that's the other interesting thing about Guatemala is there's like over 27 languages spoken in Guatemala. And many people speak multiple languages, but because they have to, so they speak their tribal language, but they also have to speak Spanish, which is very interesting because Spanish is the main language there.
Okay. And what kind of a town is it? I mean, how much infrastructure is there? I mean, are there hotels? Are there nice big resort hotels? Is it like what do you have there?
Yeah, so the town closest is the name of it is Flores, and it does have a small airport, and that's the jumping off point for a lot of tourists to go to Tikal, which is the Mayan ruins, one of the largest Mayan ruins, I believe, in the world. It's definitely one of the largest land reservations in the world. And what's neat about the thing that Tikal is known for is that's where the original Star Wars and that pyramid
Hmm.
thing scene was filmed.
Really?
Was up of off of one of those pyramids, Pyramid Number 4, and so a lot of people will go to see it for that. But then Apocalypto was made in that area too, the Mel Gibson film a while back. So there's a lot of people that will fly there and then head out to go see the Mayan ruins. So there are some hotels. In fact, there are some really nice areas too, nice hotels that are a little bit outside of town. Francis and I don't know how to say his last name, Coppola, the producer of The Godfather,
Yeah.
has a couple hotels that are very nice. I've never been to them, but the pictures are incredible there as well. So most of it is poor, heavily dense jungle,
Mm.
but there are these pockets of money as well. And what's neat too is that this hospital is a nonprofit hospital, but it really serves that whole region, and they do a really good job with the resources they have. And a lot of life-saving things happen, as well as the day-to-day just education of not only diabetic patients and such, but also uh, other diseases that they kind of stay on top of. So it's a neat, the prosthetic side and the hospital side is kind of a neat collaboration where we can definitely help out, especially if an amputation is done there at the hospital.
Okay, and then and you know to just set you know you have to kind of like I guess you could just show up there one day, but I'm guessing it would be much better to interface with these people in advance. Tell how do you figure out what they need and what you need to bring and who you need to work with locally? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question because at first this it was so funny pre 2010 where before we really got our legs under us. Literally people would just find out about us and start lining up because they wanted a prosthesis. So it was through I don't even know how they found out, to be honest with you. There were some people that found out over the radio. We had somebody say, "Yeah, there was a guy that had a speaker on top of his roof and said that you are coming to provide prostheses, and here I am." And I'm like, "Wow, that's kind of crazy." But now we do have some rhyme to the reason, I guess, and the main way is we have some kind of guardrails of what does it mean to get a prosthesis. So you have to be able to do some basic activities, like you have to be able to stand up, you have to be able to hop uh, 10 to 20 feet in a walker. Um, that's actually some of the main stuff. And then if you're able to do that, then there is a list of people. And the way that we prioritize is kids under 21 automatically get seen, or we say kids, but 21 and under automatically get seen. They kind of get bumped to the front of the list. And it's just because a prosthesis affords those younger people, it can truly fork their life. We've seen so many kids now, that they're some of them are getting married, some of them are going to university, and they've gone from the status of, you know, pretty much nothing, potentially making money while begging, to we've got a couple people that are going into business administration, some looking at nursing, and so that's a big change. And so we truly believe that life change starts with this younger generation, and if we can keep them kind of going, it gets them out of this loop of poverty, and it gives them an opportunity to not only give something back to society, but then also it also provides a way for them to provide for their family.
But how do you then prioritize that? Because I guess you could well you can't spend the time per patient and the multiple visits than than you normally do, right? In the States, you can have somebody come back 3 weeks from then or something like that, right? So you have to compress everything a little bit, right? Or it's a little bit the patient flow, if you will, is a little bit different than the States, right? First off, or
Definitely different in the US. I think the neat thing, though, and COVID really exposed a lot of non governmental organizations that do prostheses because those people just didn't go. The neat thing about what Life Enabled has done is over the last 7 years, we've really been investing in some local talent. And so, even though we did go, but we only went once in 2021, and then we're back on our normal schedule. No, we did go twice in 2021, but we missed one the end of 2020 because the country was just locked down. There was no way to get in. But we had been investing in a couple local people over the last 7 to 8 years on making prostheses. So they actually kind of kept the fort down and did a great job not only seeing new patients, but then keeping these devices modified, any adjustments, padding, things that broke, all that stuff they were able to do in spite of us not being able to be there. And so that is what really set this whole kind of plan in motion is, hey, how can we, instead of compressing a bunch of patients into a short amount of time, how can we use people, and his name is Marlon. We've got three main ones: Marlon, Vivi, and Veronica. They live right there. And so they not only communicate with the patients to make sure they have everything they need, everything's working, but then also Marlon is there to make sure that everything is functioning correctly and has the skills to make adjustments and such. So one of the things that we do now is that many of these patients are almost pre-screened via teleconferencing, WhatsApp, or Messenger. But then a lot of times they've already been seen with our boots on the ground too. And that's been really neat. And Marlon is now pretty up to speed on making transtibial prostheses or below the knee prostheses. And so that takes some of the list, so to speak, to where we don't actually have to see those specific patients unless there's problems with them or something that we may need to do. And he's getting better and better at that. In fact, we do quite a bit of FaceTime or Messenger if he runs into an issue, and we can troubleshoot while I'm here and he's right there with the patient. So the technology, as far as phones and stuff, has really been a blessing for that. And our hope and our idea is we'd love to see a time where we don't have to be down there, and that enough people are trained to be able to take care of that whole thing, that whole clinic, really down there. So
Yeah, I think that'd be
we
wonderful.
love that it runs for the most part by itself, and then we come in and we do maybe some of the more complex things or some things that are more expensive to do or rare to see.
Yeah, but so but how do you then? Because you're kind of like you come in there like a couple times a year. How do you find the right people to
Yep.
work with? I mean, how do you know you can trust someone? How do you know someone has the right kind of gumption, the right skill to do this?
It's really hard. We have lost three people that we thought were going to be amazing. And the thing, as I mentioned earlier, there's only one or two prosthetists that are in the city, maybe a couple technicians, but it's a skill that's quite valuable in Guatemala, and for that matter, really all of Central America. And the area that we go is not the most friendly area as far as just the environment. It's wicked hot all the time. It's dusty, um, just not great living conditions. Whereas Guatemala City, they call it the land of eternal spring because it really is. You might get down into the 60s and you may hit the 80s, but that's it. It's gorgeous all the time in Guatemala City, and that's why so many people gravitate towards that area, and a lot of people want to get out of the area that we're in. So after we lost those people, we're like, you know what, we need to really invest in somebody that's going to stay, that this is home for them, and that we so we can invest in them. And so that's what we've did. And Marlon has definitely shown that over the years. And he actually has a construction business up in that area. So the skills transfer very well as far as hand skills and such to the prosthetic industry. And then the ladies that we have also trained on some of the just patient care side of things. One of them is a social worker. The other one is an amputee herself, one of the first arms that I ever fit in that area. And she's the one that kind of follows up on patients, makes sure everything's going well. And, they have deep roots to that area, and they'll be staying as well. So that's been tough for us, though, is making sure that we have the right people in place. And at some point, you just have to trust that we do. And it's definitely worked so far this go around.
Okay. All right. And how much time does this take? Because there's the one part. Okay, so there's one part the several weeks a year you go there, but throughout the year there's all sorts of things you have to do and conform and follow up and interview and stuff. Do you have any idea how much time this would take to be involved in this? Or how much of your time is this you put in this? Or
Yeah, so it really is. I mean, we build up for that one week every half a year essentially. And so there's a lot of evenings and such. You got to order parts. You got to make sure that you've got the left, right, their activity level, that sort of thing as far as parts go. But then once you're there, um, you're going pretty much the whole time. You do stop to sleep and eat a little bit, but you are going the whole time, because what you want to do is make sure that when this device is fabricated and made, not only can the patient use it, but that they're comfortable with it. And then they know that they can come back, and if there's an adjustment needed, somebody can do that on the backside. So I think that's the other part that is unique about what Life Enabled does, is that because somebody is there full time, sometimes things break, or sometimes things fit, or it might have fit for a couple months, but the third month, because of their activity level, maybe their leg has shrunk a little bit, there has to be some padding put in. And instead of needing to put it in a corner, they can actually come for an adjustment and keep on wearing it, because there's somebody local there that can make that adjustment. So it is a lot to think of in that super focused amount of time, but we're able to, I feel, plan it out pretty well, because we have boots on the ground, and then we also have a good stock of things too. So we try to stay 1 to 2 clinics ahead of schedule on the amount of parts that we have down there. And that's another good point too, is one of the things that we do is we don't use donated components. So like if grandma dies and you want to give it to somebody, that wouldn't be for us. There's other groups that do that. And here's one of the main reasons why we do that is, across the US, different prosthetists use different components for different patients. And it's because we have the luxury to do that. But when you're there, especially in the jungle of Guatemala, it's important that some of this stuff is interchangeable. So we are consistent with the types of knees that we use. We use the consistent foot that. So if anything breaks, we can literally do just a swap out of that specific part, and you don't have to change the height because it's a different size knee, or you don't have to change the height of a prosthesis because you put a different height of foot on there. And also it helps with the fabrication process, because we know what parts we're going to be using. We're able to standardize the production and be more efficient in the way we do things. And then lastly with that is, sometimes donated components have been used and abused, and sometimes they don't work all the way, or you have to spend time fiddling with them to make them work, or robbing parts off of this prosthesis to make one prosthesis work. And we don't have to do any of that. So we've partnered with a couple companies that give us really great rates on buying parts. And then there's a few companies in Hong Kong and China that make some very high quality components that we buy from, that make it very cost effective when we do a prosthesis. So that's another very unique thing to Life Enabled.
Okay, okay. And and if you think about, like, you don't do this alone, right? So there's these local people, but there's also all these people in the states that work you that will help you out, right?
Correct. Yeah. So there's a couple administrators from the hospital that make sure that we have all the documentation needed to get into country, and then some of the things that you don't think about is where are you going to stay, where are you going to eat, what are you going to eat, if you have some sort of emergency, where are you going to do, what kind of plans do you have in place. And my wife Meredith is actually the director of our nonprofit, because she's good at all that stuff, and that's not something that I'm good at, which is great. But you never go hungry. You've got a place to sleep that's safe with air conditioning, that sort of thing. And then you also have willing hands to be able to hold something or go cut something, or be able to taught how do you assemble a prosthesis. And so that's also very helpful. Yeah, it's definitely a team effort.
Okay, okay. And then and if you, yeah, are there any advice you would give me if somebody wanted, if you're a prosthetist and you're listening to this and you want to do this yourself, what is the main advice that you would give me? Like, go slow or plan, or what would you tell me to do?
My biggest thing for if you are looking to get into some sort of nonprofit work is, more than likely there's somebody that's already doing something. So figure out how you can partner with them. And then when you're researching it, see what their vision is. Are they investing in local talent, or are they just coming in? Do they stay in one spot and serve a specific area, or do they go to multiple spots? I think one of the things and the reason why we kind of just stayed is it's important because these not only are humans living and breathing, but and they change. And so these prostheses, unless someone's there to change them along with how the patient changes, then really you're setting yourself up for failure. And so, my encouragement to people is, hey, find a group that you believe in, on what their final product looks like, how they provide for patients, what is their long-term strategy on follow-up care, because that's when the real care starts. And then I think the other side of things is there are groups that are faith-based groups, and then there are groups that are more humanitarian-based groups. So, and there's good groups and bad groups in both areas. And so, uh, if you want to do some sort of work with a faith-based group, you have that option, or if you want to do it as a humanitarian group. But I would also say, for those that say don't necessarily have a faith, um, these faith-based groups, and specifically ours, Life Enabled, we are a faith-based group, but we're not going to take you because you don't have or share the same faith as we do. And so, and it can be a wonderful experience and a respectful experience. And, we learn a lot about each other that way. And I would say the same thing on the humanitarian side. There's a lot of people that are, strictly humanitarian that have some sort of faith there. But just know there is going to be an undertone either way of why you are providing the devices. Is it because you are doing something for the greater good, or you believe in somebody that like God, that believes in taking care of people and giving everybody an opportunity to walk, and you do it because of your faith, not necessarily because you want to feel good about
Okay,
helping people.
okay. And in your case, like, was it something that you just said, "Oh, we'll try it once," or did you make a commitment at one? Because at one point, I think you needed, especially if you got local people, especially if you have people you give a device to, you do have to kind of be there for them. You can't just fire or forget. It's not about giving people a bag of rice or something and then just saying, hey, later. You have to kind of be there. You have to kind of guarantee these things to a certain extent. So when did you commit yourself to this, and for what time did you commit? Did you say, okay, I'm going to do this forever, 2 weeks a year, or how did that shape up?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think that is a super important question. And when we started, or when I started in Guatemala, I knew that this is where I wanted to spend my time and talents. I wanted to make sure that I'm able to go back, and there's nothing more rewarding to like. I just went back and I saw Jose Manuel, which was my very first patient. He's missing both arms and both legs, and I started seeing him when he was 3 years old in 2006. So now he is 20, maybe more than that. I don't. Math is failing me right now, but it's been neat to follow his progression and just see the young man that he's become, and that's to me very rewarding. But in the same sense, people know there's so many groups that will come and go in a short amount of time, or they may come and come again, and then you'll never see from them again. And I think it's important to have that consistency, to know that, hey, this group has been here for 16 years and they've come back time and time again. They've come through COVID and they're going to be here for us and their care. And that's super important. So I believe that that's important. So the funny story about that, though, is the first time that I went down, my wife was pregnant with our first child, and she was not thrilled that I was going. And really, she wasn't thrilled until about 2012 when she went for her first time. And then she got it. And she was like, I will never not go. And so it's been neat to kind of see her. I mean, it took her about 6 years before she's like, okay, I'll go, just to see what's going on. And now, 10 years later, she will not go.
And what does it do for you? I mean, does it make you feel better about yourself or your practice, or what does it do for you?
I think one of the things for me that it does is it makes you a better clinician. But then I do enjoy the patient care side of the aspect of it, of being able to work with the resources that we have available, and then make a prosthesis, and provide a prosthesis that is excellent, that is durable, and lasts for a long time. I mean, we've iterated a bunch of times, and now I'm also doing a lot of 3D printing down there. So for me, it's an extension of how do I get better? It's almost like continuing education for me. But then I'm also making, lifelong friends in another country as well. So that's uh, that's what it does for me. Is it gives people an opportunity that would never have access to a prosthesis, and in the meantime, I'm getting to be a better clinician as well, and that's why I think it's so important.
Okay, and then the one thing is that it could be tempting to say, okay, wait a minute, we could do like 10 patients who are really relatively easy, right? Below the knee, kind of standard kind of stuff, or we could do one or two people that are really difficult, and we'd have to see them a bunch of times. Like, is that? Do you think of a triage kind of a thing like that as well? You think, or is it just like first comes first served, or what's how do you think of like that?
That's a great question. So we don't necessarily triage, but we'll do so. Like this past clinic, we did a bunch of arms, and they're very specialized. They're also can be quite expensive to do. And before 3D printing, I would never do arms because not only was it super expensive to do, but it was very hard to fabricate. Yeah. But now it's not so bad, and it's easy to follow up on the patients. So I would say right now, though, our bottleneck is creating a prosthesis for people that are transfemoral patients or above the knee amputees. there's just not a great way to provide these devices other than custom devices for patients. And it's something that we're working on, but those are definitely a time suck to us, is the above knee patients. And so we're trying to get better and better at providing that care. So for instance, we saw all the kids that we could see, whether they're above the knee, below the knee, whatever amputation they are, and then we saw arms. So now we have a list that everybody's kind of cleared off the list. We're going to continue to follow up on all those patients, but now we have a list that is strictly above the knee amputees or transfemoral amputees for the next time, and we have to figure out how we're going to, take care of the patients there. So I think we're starting to see this almost specialized clinics. So it might be, one clinic we do arms, and the next clinic we do more of the transfemorals, and we alternate. And then I can also bring volunteers and staff accordingly for those.
Okay. And how do you prepare for like the unknown? Essentially, okay. First off, like you've got an environment that's much more difficult. Right? You're not in your office. You're kind of in an improvised office somewhere. It's warmer, sweatier. Electricity's not so great. I mean, how do you prepare for that? Is that just like a can-do kind of spirit, or do you take everything you own, or how do you do that?
Yeah, great question. We have a really well outfitted lab there that we've outfitted really since 2006. We've just gradually gotten better and better, better tools, better setup, better flow. So I'm actually going to be doing a video on our lab there, and it's really great. But for things of the unknown, I'll give you a great example. So we had this young lady that we've been seeing for a while. She's a hip disarticulation, so which means that all she has is her pelvis on one side. So she doesn't have the femur, which is the long bone above your knee, and she doesn't have anything obviously below that. So we needed to change out the hip joint, the knee joint, and put a new foot on. Seems like it would be pretty easy. The problem is when you're in that kind of environment, the corrosion, even with stainless steel and aluminum components, is just unbelievable. So, for instance, to get the hip out, we got one screw out. It was a little tight, but you could see that these threads were just super corroded, and they had also stretched. I go to get the other screw out, and it breaks. And I'm like, oh no, because these hip joints have pressed inserts, and I just didn't know what I was going to do. And so you just kind of have to take a breath and be like, okay, well, I've got to get this insert out somehow. So what we ended up doing is grinding in from the other side to expose the insert, and then we had to have a sacrificial screw to beat out the insert. And then you're like, okay, so I got the insert out, but now how am I going to get something threaded in for that bolt? It's like, so then we had to, okay, so we're going to use this bolt, and we've got a semblance of a nut on this side. And so we had to grind, shape, and then we do take down some pretty awesome adhesive, and we're able to kind of fill it in, get it down, but then we have to repad everything. So that job that here in the U.S. would be literally a 5-minute job. Even on the slow side, it takes 2 hours to finish up because you just don't have everything that you need to make it go. But you make it work. And now if that happens again, I know exactly what I'll do, and that 2-hour job will be a half an hour job. Some of it is just overall experience. And I think that is the other part is, I was a technician when I started when I was 16 years old. And so now I'm 42. So I have all this experience of not only making things, but fitting things, and then this time in Guatemala. So you're able to pull from that experience to make it work. And I think that is very valuable. And then on the flip side of things, I took one of our clinicians, and she is a newer clinician, a great clinician, but it was a great learning experience for her as far as not only seeing a number of patients, but then also she was able to use the hand skills that she has for making these devices, and she'll be that much better of a clinician. And she already said, I'm definitely going to be a better clinician, and I've only been in Guatemala for a week, from what I've learned. And so that's really neat, and that makes me smile as well.
Okay, dude. Hey, Brent, thank you so much for this. You're a real inspiration, man. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for letting me share. And yeah, we'll maybe have to do something on site. Take you to Guatemala. How's that, yours?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind. I used to travel a lot. Now I'm like kind of like really wimpy in my travel, so it would be very exciting, I think, to go. Um, yeah, thank you for listening to the Prosthetics and Orthotics podcast with Brent Wright and Joris Peels. Have a wonderful day. And thank you very much for your time.